When Skid Row burst onto the scene in 1989, they had the voice, the look, and the songs that lit up MTV. Their debut album went 5 times platinum, launching them from New Jersey garage gigs to stardom. But behind the success was a deal that they didn't understand, a deal that sent millions in royalties to Jon Bon Jovi's company, not the band that wrote the songs. While Skid Row packed stadiums and sold records by the millions, Bon Jovi's team cashed the checks. What started as a favor between childhood friends became one of rock's most bitter financial betrayals. Chapter 1: Humble Beginnings. Before the stadiums and platinum records, Skid Row was just another hungry band. Formed in 1986 in Toms River, New Jersey, bassist Rachel Bolan and guitarist Dave "Snake" Sabo built the foundation of what would become a hard rock powerhouse. The early lineup included guitarist Scotty Hill and drummer Rob Affuso, with vocalist Matt Fallon taking the mic. But when Sebastian Bach joined in 1987, the final piece fell into place. Bach brought more than just his powerful vocal range. His magnetic stage presence gave Skid Row the edge that they needed in the crowded hair metal scene. Their demos started turning heads, but breaking through required more than just talent. Enter Jon Bon Jovi, already riding high on the massive success of Slippery When Wet. His connection to Skid Row wasn't just industry networking, it was personal. Sabo and Bon Jovi had grown up together in New Jersey. The childhood friends had a connection that would shape Skid Row's future, but the relationship would come with strings attached. When Bon Jovi introduced Skid Row to his manager, Doc McGee, and facilitated a 1988 record deal with Atlantic Records, it seemed like their big break. The band gained early exposure opening for Bon Jovi on tour. Sebastian Bach later recalled how it felt. They were nobodies, suddenly playing arenas, which is a rare opportunity. What the band didn't realize was that this golden ticket would eventually come with a steep price tag. Chapter 2: The Deal. The publishing deal with Bon Jovi's underground music company seemed like a no-brainer to the young, inexperienced members of Skid Row. In exchange for Jon Bon Jovi's industry connections, tour support, and record deal, they signed away something they barely understood: their publishing royalties. Now, the terms were clear, but the consequences were not obvious. Reportedly, all publishing royalties from their debut album would go to Jon Bon Jovi and Richie Sambora. Not a percentage, not a limited time deal, all of it. Now, at first, it didn't seem to matter. Getting on stage was the dream, not reading fine print. They were playing arenas instead of bars, getting exposure beyond anything they could have arranged themselves. Then the debut album Skid Row hit in 1989 and everything changed. The self-titled record became a monster hit. Singles like 18 in Life, I Remember You, and Youth Gone Wild dominated MTV and radio. The album achieved 5-time platinum status in the United States alone. That is over 5 million copies sold. And based on industry standards, the publishing royalties for Skid Row could be estimated at around $4 million from the US sales alone. If the album generated approximately $40 million in wholesale revenue, 5 million albums at roughly $8 wholesale per album, the publishing cut would be at 10% or $4 million. That was $4 million that reportedly went directly to Jon Bon Jovi and Richie Sambora, not the band who created the music. According to Sebastian Bach in a 2024 interview, he threatened to quit when he realized what they had given away. Chapter 3: Realizing the Loss. As Skid Row continued to climb the charts, the band began to understand the true value of what they had signed away. Sebastian Bach later described the bitter realization. While they were becoming rock stars, they weren't becoming rich rock stars. At least not as rich as they should have been. Under a standard publishing deal, a band might expect about 80 cents per album in royalties. Multiplied across millions of units, the loss was staggering. While Skid Row still earned money from record sales and touring, a significant revenue stream was flowing directly to Bon Jovi and Sambora. The resentment grew as the band toured relentlessly to support their breakthrough album. They were working harder than ever while watching a substantial portion of their potential earnings go to already wealthy rock stars who hadn't written a single note of their music. According to Bach in a 2024 interview, Richie Sambora had returned his share of the royalties after the public dispute came to light, but there was no confirmation that Jon Bon Jovi had done the same, fueling ongoing resentment from Bach and others in the band. Dave Sabo, given his personal history with Bon Jovi, seemed to maintain a more balanced view. He later acknowledged that Jon's work ethic and commitment to music had shown them that success was possible in the music business. The band found themselves in a classic music industry trap. They had signed away valuable rights before understanding their worth. It was a painful lesson, but one that would inform their approach to their next album. Chapter 4: Fight Back. By 1991, Skid Row was no longer the wide-eyed newcomers who had eagerly signed whatever was put in front of them. The massive success of their debut album had taught them some hard lessons about the business side of rock and roll. As they prepared for their sophomore album, Slave to the Grind, they were determined to change the game. They hired legal representation to renegotiate the deal. With professional guidance, Skid Row confronted the publishing arrangement head-on. According to a 2024 U.S. Celeb News report, the strategy was bold. They demanded 25% of all earnings from their second album. It was a dramatic shift from the original deal where they received nothing from publishing. This time, they would not accept vague promises of exposure and opportunity. They wanted their fair share in writing. The renegotiation represented more than just a financial correction. It was a declaration of independence and a recognition of their own value. No longer content to be grateful for just a seat at the table, Skid Row was asserting their right to the feast that they were helping to prepare. Their newfound business savvy coincided with an evolution in their music. Slave to the Grind marked a heavier, more aggressive sound that pushed beyond the glossy hair metal of their debut. The gamble paid off spectacularly. Slave to the Grind debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200, the first heavy metal album ever to enter the charts at the top spot. It would go on to sell over 2 million copies in the US, validating both their artistic direction and their business decisions. While they couldn't recover the lost royalties from their debut, they had successfully changed the trajectory of their financial future. This victory was particularly significant given the timing. The early 1990s marked the beginning of the end for hair metal as grunge began to take over the airwaves. Chapter 5: Industry Fallout. The Skid Row Bon Jovi controversy highlighted industry practices that had been common for years. The music business had long seen established artists leveraging their influence over newcomers, sometimes to their own advantage. Established stars like Jon Bon Jovi wielded enormous influence, serving as gatekeepers who could either elevate or exploit newer acts. Their endorsement could open doors, but as Skid Row discovered that access might come at a steep price. The controversy potentially raised awareness about publishing rights among young bands. Artists who had previously focused exclusively on getting signed began asking more questions about the fine print in their contracts. Fan reactions were mixed. Some defended Bon Jovi, arguing that his support had given Skid Row opportunities that they wouldn't have had otherwise. Others maintained that Skid Row's talent alone had driven their success, and Bon Jovi had taken advantage of his position to claim an unfair share of their earnings. The timing of this controversy was particularly significant, coinciding with the decline of hair metal as a dominant commercial force. As grunge began reshaping the musical landscape, many hard rock bands found themselves struggling to adapt. For Dave Sabo, the situation was especially complex. He acknowledged Bon Jovi's early support while navigating the band's frustration over the financial arrangements. In later interviews, he maintained that Jon had been a great mentor. Chapter 6: Aftermath and Legacy. Despite the financial setbacks and interpersonal drama, Skid Row continued to build their legacy throughout the early 1990s. Slave to the Grind had proven that they were more than one-hit wonders, establishing them as a legitimate force in hard rock. The band's relationship dynamics, however, grew increasingly strained. Creative differences, personality conflicts, and lingering resentments over their early business dealings created fissures that would eventually fracture the classic lineup. In 1996, Sebastian Bach departed the band, marking the end of Skid Row's most commercially successful era. In 2024, Bach acknowledged that Bon Jovi took a chance on Skid Row when no one else would. This perspective added some nuance to what had often been portrayed as purely exploitative relationship. Now, whether this acknowledgement reflected a true reconciliation remains unclear. Most publishing royalties, estimated at $4 million, were not recovered, though Sambora reportedly returned his share according to Bach. That money remained a permanent reminder of the cost of their entry into the world of rock stardom. Skid Row continued on with various lineups, maintaining a devoted following even as they moved from arenas to smaller venues. Sebastian Bach pursued a solo career, carrying forward the vocal power that had defined Skid Row's sound. In 2022, the band released The Gang's All Here, demonstrating their continued relevance in the rock landscape. Though the lineup had changed over the decades, the Skid Row name still resonated with fans of hard-hitting melodic rock. The financial reasons they learned early in their career served as a warning to generations of bands that followed. In the music business, the fine print matters just as much as the hit singles. The story of Skid Row and Jon Bon Jovi reveals how quickly the dream of rock stardom can collide with harsh business realities. What began as a connection between New Jersey musicians became a cautionary tale about the value of publishing rights and the importance of legal protection. Skid Row's lost royalties highlighted the music industry's darker side. The debut album's publishing royalties from over 5 million U.S. sales were lost to Bon Jovi's company, while the band learned to protect their interests with their second release. Despite these challenges, Skid Row achieved remarkable success, selling millions of records and influencing countless musicians. They proved that even after a significant financial setback, talent and determination could lead to chart-topping success and a lasting place in rock history. Beyond the dollars and cents, their story represents the complex reality of making music for a living, where opportunity and exploitation often walk hand in hand. For those of you who lived through the hair metal era, we want to hear from you. Did you happen to catch Skid Row opening for Bon Jovi back in the day? What memories do you have of hearing those first Skid Row hits on the radio? Share your stories down in the comments below.